Welcome back, and in this lesson, we're going to be introducing animation. So far, we've got a game where we've got some limited interaction, and when we click the dynamically created element, we can change its color, but it's not very interesting because it's always in the same spot. It's not moving around, not doing anything too exciting. So let's make this more interesting, and of course, animation makes everything interesting. So selecting our window object, we're going to add a request animation frame. And this is the ideal solution for creating a loop of constantly invoked functions. So creating a function, we're going to create a function called move, and this is where it's going to handle all of our animation. And this one here is going to be the initial one that's going to kick off our animation frame. So creating a function, having it called move, this is where all the magic is going to happen. So let's set up some random speed that we can add in using math random. And I know when I say random, I always mean that we're looking at JavaScript to create some random values. So we can do 10 plus 15. So it's always going to be a minimum of at least 15, and it could be all the way up to 25, or it could stay at 15. So it's always going to move at least the speed of 15. Next, we need to select our element that we want to move around. And this is the one that we gave it a class of box. We could as well pass it into the move object, but an easier way and more efficient way is to select our box element and using document, because now it's available within the document object, we can use query selector. So that's one of my favorite methods to use, selecting the element with a class of box. So that's going to bring us within this function. So allow us to utilize that element within this function. So that's that box element. This is the one that we created dynamically in the previous lesson. We can get its boundaries as well. So we can get bounds of it, creating a variable for that. And this is the boundaries of the output area. So we know what our parameters are, where we can move the box to, because we do want it to stay within that output object. And for now, I'll console log out bounds. So these are the boundaries for our box where we're going to move it around to. And you see that with the get bounding client rectangle, we get a lot of really good information. And this is the information that's contained within this output object. So we've got a bottom, we've got a height, left, right, top, width, X and Y position. So X position is 8, Y is 24, and we know that we want to keep our parameters in here. And this is really good, especially if we're moving things around, that we have these values to work with, because we don't want to move it off of screen or off of the visible area. And keeping this in mind as well, there's all other ways to calculate this, but this is one of the easiest ways by doing the get bounding client rectangle, so we don't have to add in its left position and then add the width to get the right position. We have that all within that one object. So next thing that we want to do is we want to set a series of steps. So when it's moving around, we want it to move within one direction or the other. Otherwise, it's going to be very zigzaggedy and jaggedy. So creating another object as we created that element, and we're going to give this one a name of steps. This can also utilize random, multiplying it by a value of 20. So it will take 20 steps in either direction on a random basis. So next we can take that element object and we can take that steps value and decrease it by 1. And next, check to see if steps is less than 0. And if it is, then we're going to reset the number of steps. And this is going to also account for the direction. So we're going to set a default direction for the element using math floor and then math random, because we want to have a random number, a random direction, and there's 4 possible directions. So anywhere from 0 to 3 is what we want to return back here. So our direction is going to change. So taking that element direction, and we also need to change that whenever our box hits 0. So we need to have the same 2 values here as we do whenever the box hits 0, whenever we want to change directions and reset the number of steps. So this is giving us a random direction that we can move the box in. So for now, we can console log out that information. So we can do box direction. And as we refresh, One other thing that we do need to add in, if we want to complete our animation, we have to call our animation frame again. So make sure that we add that in, and this is going to be done at the end of the animation. So basically this function is going to call itself, and it's going to continue to loop and animate the movement. So you can see here that we're constantly counting down and we're getting a direction. The direction is staying for a number of steps, and that's actually what we want because we want it to move in one direction or the other. We don't want it to be all zigzaggedy and jaggedy. So adding in that direction, the next thing that we can do is we can check to see what the direction is and what direction we're supposed to be going. So taking our direction element object, so taking direction, just refresh this, and I'm not going to get rid of this one because we don't need to constantly see this direction because it's a little bit distracting there running in the console. Box direction, we're checking to see if the direction is 0, and we can apply any direction to this. And also we're going to check to see if box X position is less than, and we've got our bounds that we set, that bounds object. So this is the boundary object. So we're checking to see if box X is less than the bounds right position minus 100. And if it is, then that means that we can increment the box X value by whatever speed is. So we're going to add speed value. So we're not going to see a whole lot happening quite yet. And the interesting thing is when we update its style position, and we're going to set our top style to be equal to our box Y plus pix, and the pix is really important, and also correspondingly so we can move the horizontal, and all this is resetting is the style position of that element, and that's how we're getting the animation and movement. So you see that it is moving, and it's only moving to the right so far, and it's hitting the boundary and it's not moving any further. So let's add in the ability to move in the other direction. So adding in if the bounds, if the direction is 1, we're gonna check to make sure that bounds is larger or that X is larger than bounds left. And if it is, then we can subtract the speed. So this will get us to move left, let us to move right, and 2 more directions to go. So next, let's check to see if our direction is 2, and if direction is 2, and as long as we're accounting for all the directions, it doesn't matter which one you use as 0, 1, 2, 3, it doesn't really matter. They all have equal chance of being displayed. So checking to see our box Y position, and we're checking to see if box Y, and this one is another one where we have to formulate the bounds value, and we're using bottom. And bottom, just like right, should have a subtraction of 100, which will give us the ability to move it down to just above the visible area. And this is going to be Y plus. So it's not minus because we're moving it down. So now our element will move down. It'll get stuck there at the bottom because we don't have the ability to move up quite yet. And that's the last one that we need to include. So the last direction is the moving of up. And this one, just like moving left, we just have to make sure that bounds Y is greater than the bounds top. And if it is, then we can keep subtracting off of it. So now we've got our element and it's moving around rapidly on the page. And the objective really is to kind of click it and try to catch it, click it. And once you do, then we can update and change the color. So we can also introduce one more variable into there. So we can have something like score. And I'll show you how to do that in the upcoming lesson where we've got an X and a Y and a score, and we'll increase score every time we click the element. Still to come, so go ahead and add in the ability to move your element around, the one that we created, that box element, and make sure that stays within the boundaries of its parent, and you're ready to go to move on to the next lesson.